My name is Serena Croft. For most of my 34 years, I have believed that my purpose was to be a point of stillness in a turbulent world, a foundation upon which others could build. I am an architect, by trade and by nature. I find solace in clean lines, in the mathematical certainty of a well-drawn plan, in the way light can be coaxed into a dark space. My own life has been a quiet blueprint of reliability. I live in Seattle. In a condominium I designed myself from two smaller, neglected units, overlooking the deep, contemplative gray of Elliott Bay. The space is my sanctuary, filled with the scent of old books, cedarwood, and the jasmine tea I drink every morning. It is a life built on precision, on effort, and on the deeply ingrained belief that showing up is the most profound expression of love. For 15 years, the first Sunday of the month was sacred. It was the day I made the pilgrimage to my parents' house on Bainbridge Island. The ritual was its own form of architecture, a structure that held our family together. It began with the slow, rhythmic crawl of the ferry across the Sound, the air thick with the smell of salt and diesel, the cries of gulls like sharp, plaintive notes against the hum of the engine. I'd stand on the deck, even in the persistent drizzle of a Pacific Northwest autumn, and watch the city's skyline recede, its sharp angles softening into a watercolor smudge. That particular Sunday, the sky was a heavy blanket of bruised purple, and the water below was the color of slate. On the passenger seat beside me sat my offering, a heavy, enameled cast-iron pot, the color of a twilight sky. Inside, a beef and barley stew had been simmering for 6 hours, the meat so tender it threatened to dissolve into the rich, dark broth. It was my father, Walter's, favorite. I'd made it with a new stout from a local brewery and herbs from the small garden on my balcony. The aroma of rosemary and thyme filled my car, a warm, earthy promise of homecoming. That scent, for me, was the very essence of family, nourishing, dependable, unconditional. Their house was nestled amongst towering Douglas firs, a classic cedar-shingled home with a wide, welcoming porch. The windows glowed with a soft, buttery light, a beacon against the encroaching dusk. I saw my brother Julian's polished silver sedan parked in its usual spot, closest to the door. He was always first, always positioned for the easiest entry and exit. I parked behind him, the crunch of gravel under my tires a familiar sound. Lifting the heavy pot, its warmth seeping through the 2 oven mitts I'd used to cradle it, I walked up the stone path. The air was cool and clean, smelling of damp earth and pine needles. Each step was a memory. The third stone, the one that always wobbled, the creak of the bottom porch step, the smooth, cool feel of the brass doorknob. I was about to turn it, we never knocked, when the voices from inside reached me, filtered through the old, single-paned glass of the living room window. "Serena will handle it. You know she will." It was Walter's voice, devoid of warmth, a statement of fact as solid and unyielding as a support beam. I froze, my hand hovering inches from the door. The stew in my arms, which had felt like a gift, suddenly felt like a weight. My mother, Beatrice, her voice a thin, frayed thread. "But Walter, $250,000? That's not just a leaky roof. How could Julian even get into this kind of trouble?" "The how doesn't matter, B," Julian's voice cut in, sharp and impatient. It was the voice he used when he felt cornered, the one that had always made me want to soothe him. "What matters is that the preliminary audit is just the beginning. My lawyer said if I can make restitution before they file formal charges, it might stay a civil matter. Otherwise, he didn't have to finish." Then Walter again, his tone calm, strategic. "We'll manage it." Serena's firm, Thorne and Davies, just made her a junior partner. Remember? She was so proud. She must be making a fortune. All that bonus money. The pot in my hands didn't move, but deep inside me, a tectonic plate shifted. A hairline fracture appeared in the foundation of everything I thought I knew. I stood there in the gathering dark, a silent ghost on my own family's porch, listening to them design my ruin. "She mentioned they landed that big waterfront project," Julian added, his voice regaining its confidence. "Partners on a project like that get huge payouts. She can afford it." A sigh from my mother, a sound like rustling leaves. "She works so tirelessly." It doesn't seem fair to ask. There was a flicker of something, guilt, maybe, or love, but it was quickly extinguished. We'll break it down, Walter said, his voice taking on the cadence of a man sketching a blueprint. We start with the house. We'll tell her the foundation is cracked. Say we need $50,000 for immediate repairs. She won't question that. She loves this old house. The house I had spent a summer helping him reshingle. The house whose every flaw and feature I knew by heart. And then, my mother's voice was softer now, as if she were learning her lines, convincing herself of the script. I can tell her my doctor found something. A shadow on a scan. That I need a series of expensive tests, procedures, things insurance won't fully cover. Julian's laugh was a short, ugly bark. The health scare. Classic mom. That always gets her. She turns to mush the second she thinks one of us is sick. They were discussing me as if I were a problem to be solved, a resource to be tapped. The dependable one. The daughter who remembered anniversaries, who paid for celebratory dinners, who brought the stew. The girl who never said no. Remember that business investment? Julian's voice was thick with a strange mix of derision and pride. 30 grand. Poof. Didn't even ask for a contract. Never mentioned it again. She gave us her signing bonus from her first big job, Walter added, a note of satisfaction in his voice. $50,000. Just transferred it. Said we deserved a new car and a real vacation after all those years of putting us through school. Who even does that? Julian mused, and the cruelty in his tone was what finally broke me. It's like she's living in a black and white movie. She still thinks we're the Waltons. It's almost pitiful. Beatrice didn't defend me. Not really. Don't talk about your sister that way, Julian. It was a token protest, a whisper against a storm. She's naive, Mom, he said, his voice flat. She thinks showing up with a pot of that goddamn stew actually means something. I couldn't breathe. My lungs felt encased in concrete. I looked down at the pot in my hands, the beautiful twilight blue pot I'd given them for their anniversary last year. I saw myself standing on this porch, year after year, arms full, heart open, a willing participant in my own diminishment. I wasn't a daughter, I was an asset. I wasn't a sister, I was a safety net. Serena can't refuse you if you cry, B. Walter instructed, his voice low and firm. Just remember that. Let the tears come. It always works. I hate lying to her, she whispered. It's not a lie, it's a necessity, Julian snapped back. It's for the family. Her money is our money. It's not like she has anyone else to spend it on. No husband, no kids. What's she doing with it all? Redecorating that sterile apartment of hers. My sanctuary. The one place on earth that was wholly mine. The home I had built not just with wood and glass, but with my own quiet strength, a testament to the life I had carved out for myself. She'll be fine, Walter declared, his voice a gavel coming down. She's resourceful. She always lands on her feet. Are you certain there's no other way? Beatrice asked, one last, feeble attempt. Julian's voice dropped to a chilling whisper. Do you want to visit me in a federal penitentiary for wire fraud and tax evasion? Because that's the other way. My lawyer was very clear. If I can pay back the funds I relocated before the official indictment, there's a chance they'll let it go. This is it. Wire fraud. Tax evasion. My brother, the golden boy, the one they bragged about at neighborhood potlucks, wasn't just in debt. He was a criminal. And they had already decided that I would be the one to pay his price. Slowly, carefully, I took a step back. Then another. I willed the wobbly stone to stay silent, the creaky step to hold its breath. My hands felt slick inside the oven mitts. I made it to my car, the heavy pot now feeling like an anchor threatening to pull me under. I placed it on the passenger seat, its warmth a mocking reminder of the coldness I'd just witnessed. I didn't start the car. I just sat there, the engine silent, listening to the gentle patter of rain on the roof. The world outside the windows was a blur of dark green and gray. My phone buzzed in the center console. A text from my mother. Where are you, honey? The stew smells wonderful. We're all waiting. My thumb hovered over the screen, trembling. My fingers felt clumsy, disconnected from my brain. I typed a reply, the words feeling alien on my tongue. So sorry. Just got pulled into a work emergency. A problem with a build site. Have to go. Rain check. The three little dots appeared, pulsing. Then, her response. Oh dear. That's a shame. We had something important to discuss with you. Can it wait? The foundation. The lie was already beginning. Sorry, Mom. Miranda says it's critical. Love you. I typed the last two words out of a habit so deeply ingrained it felt like a reflex. But as I looked at them on the screen, they felt like a lie. I didn't drive home. I drove to the ferry terminal and just sat in the queue, watching the boats glide back and forth like spectral shuttles between two worlds. The world where I was loved and the world where I was used. I had been living in both, I realized, without ever understanding they were two separate places. By the time I finally pulled into my garage in Seattle, the stew was cold. I left the pot on the passenger seat. I couldn't bear to touch it. I walked into my beautiful, quiet apartment with empty hands. For a long time, I stood at my floor-to-ceiling windows, not turning on the lights. I watched the city lights glitter across the dark water, each one a small, defiant spark in the vast darkness. Something inside me had cracked open. It wasn't the sharp, hot rage I might have expected. It was a profound, quiet sorrow. A clarity that felt as cold and clean as the glass against my forehead. I remembered the $50,000 signing bonus. I had been so proud to give it to them, to ease their burdens. I remembered the $30,000 for Julian's business. He'd said he was on the verge of a breakthrough. I'd paid for anniversary trips, new appliances, dental work. I never kept a tally. I never asked for a penny in return. I thought it was what a good daughter, a good sister, did. I thought it was the architecture of love. But I saw it now with the dispassionate eye of an architect reviewing a flawed design. The structure was unsound. The foundation was a lie. They hadn't seen my generosity as love. They had seen it as a precedent. They had seen it as my function. By the time the sun began to hint at its return, staining the eastern sky a pale, fragile pink, a new blueprint was forming in my mind. It was quiet, it was precise, and it was my own. I wasn't going to scream or cry or confront them. Not yet. I was going to protect myself. The next morning, I didn't make tea. I made phone calls. I sat at the polished walnut desk in my home office, the one that looked out over the bay, and I began to build a fortress. I opened every financial account I possessed, checking, savings, investments, my retirement portfolio. Systematically, I transferred every liquid sent to new accounts at a completely different banking institution, one with no history, no connection to my family. I spent 2 hours on the phone, setting up new passwords, two-factor authentication on everything, changing security questions from my mother's maiden name to the name of a stray cat I'd fed once in college. I called my brokerage firm and put a verbal password on my account, a word only I would know. I methodically, quietly, built a wall. My phone rang incessantly. Beatrice. Walter. Julian. I let each call go to voicemail, the vibrations on my desk a series of small, desperate tremors. I listened to none of them. Instead, I sent a single, concise email to Miranda Thorne, the formidable founding partner of my firm. The subject line was simple: personal matter, urgent. May I have a moment of your time? Miranda was a woman who seemed to be carved from granite and grace. She was in her late 50s, with a sharp, intelligent gaze that missed nothing. She had built Thorne and Davies from the ground up, and her office, on the top floor with a panoramic view of the Cascade Mountains, felt like the command center of an empire. When I walked in, she gestured to a leather armchair without preamble. "Serena, you look troubled. Sit." "I need advice, Miranda," I began, my voice steadier than I expected. Not as my boss, but as a woman I deeply respect. "It's personal, but I'm afraid it may soon affect my work." She folded her hands on her vast mahogany desk and simply nodded. "Tell me." And so I did. I told her everything. The Sunday ritual, the stew, the voices through the window. The cold, calculated plan to extract $250,000 from me. The history of my financial gifts. Julian's fraud. Their perception of me as a naive, bottomless resource. I laid out the facts as if I were presenting a project brief, keeping my emotions locked down, focusing on the data. Miranda listened without interruption, her expression hardening with every word I spoke. When I finished, a heavy silence filled the room, broken only by the distant hum of the city. She leaned forward, her eyes locked on mine. "First," she said, her voice low and firm, "you have handled this initial stage with extraordinary composure. Most people would have shattered. You built a wall. Good." I felt a small, unfamiliar flicker of pride. "Second," she continued, "you need a lawyer. Immediately. Not because you've done anything wrong, but because they have. When they realize their access is cut off, they may become creative. You need to be prepared for them to twist your generosity into a weapon against you. Third, you need a record." She pushed a notepad and a pen across the desk. "Document everything. Every dollar you ever gave them. Every request, every sob story. Dates, amounts, reasons. Create a history. Your memory is your shield." I took a deep breath. "I already started," I said, pulling my laptop from my bag and opening a spreadsheet I'd begun at dawn. It was all there. 5 years of financial erosion. Column after column of dates, transfers, and notes. Mom's dental implants. Julian's investment. Dad's car repairs. The total at the bottom was a staggering number that I hadn't allowed myself to fully compute until that moment. Miranda peered at the screen. A low whistle escaped her lips. "My God, Serena. That's over $200,000. I couldn't speak. The number hung in the air, a monument to my own blindness. She looked up from the screen, and her gaze softened. For the first time, I saw not just the powerful executive, but the woman. "There is one more thing," she said gently. "We have been looking for the right person to head up the new development project in our London office. It's a major career step. Same title, significantly better compensation, and, most importantly, an ocean between you and this mess. London." The word felt foreign, impossible. "You wouldn't be going alone," she added quickly, seeing the shock on my face. "The firm would handle everything. Your visa, the move, a corporate flat until you find your own place. You would have a team, a support system. Just think about it." I left her office feeling like the world had tilted on its axis. An ocean. The thought was both terrifying and intoxicating. That afternoon, Julian finally got through. He called from a number I didn't recognize. I answered out of instinct. "Hello. Serena?" "Thank God." His voice was a cocktail of relief and irritation. "Where the hell have you been?" "I've been calling for 2 days." "I've been working," I said, my voice flat. "At that job you seem to think prints money for your personal use." A beat of stunned silence. "What is that supposed to mean?" "It means I'm busy, Julian." "What do you want?" "We need to talk. As a family. Dinner tomorrow night." "I can't," I said. "Why not? What could be more important than family?" I didn't even hesitate. My self-respect. The silence on the other end of the line was absolute. I could almost hear the gears in his head grinding, trying to process this new, unfamiliar Serena. I don't know what you're talking about," he finally stammered. "Wire fraud. Tax evasion," I said, the words falling like ice chips. "You were going to let me pay for your crimes. You, Mom, and Dad. You had a whole script worked out." He laughed then, but it was a terrible sound, high-pitched and brittle. "You were listening." "I was bringing you stew," I said, the memory of fresh, sharp pain. "I was standing on the porch for that family dinner you said I was pitiful for still believing in." Listen to me," he pleaded, his tone shifting into frantic damage control. "It's not what you think. We were just brainstorming, talking through worst-case scenarios." "It's exactly what I think," I interrupted, my voice as calm and unyielding as a stone wall. "You planned to manipulate me. You told Dad to have Mom cry. You called me naive. You laughed at me. I'm in trouble, Serena. Real trouble. You should have considered that before you committed a felony." His voice cracked with disbelief. "You're really going to let me go to prison over money? Money you can easily afford." I closed my eyes, picturing my apartment, my sanctuary, the life I had so carefully built. I couldn't afford the $50,000 I gave Mom and Dad. I couldn't afford the $30,000 I gave you. I couldn't afford any of it, Julian. But I gave it to you. I gave it all to you because I thought that's what love was. I was wrong. You're confusing love with liability. There was nothing but his ragged breathing on the line. I'm begging you, he whispered. Then beg someone else, I said. I'm done. I hung up the phone. The texts started immediately. A barrage of them, from him, from my mother, from my father. I didn't read a single one. I simply deleted the entire thread. The next day, there was a commotion in the lobby of my firm. The receptionist buzzed my desk. Serena, your mother is here. She seems very upset. I took a deep breath, stood up, and smoothed down my blazer. I'll be right down. I found her standing by the glass doors, looking small and lost amidst the soaring marble and polished steel of the lobby. Her hair was unkempt, her eyes red and swollen. She saw me and rushed forward, past the bewildered security guard. Serena, thank God. Please, we have to talk. We can talk right here, Mom, I said, my voice quiet but firm. I kept my hands clasped behind my back to stop them from shaking. She flinched, looking around at the curious glances of my colleagues passing by. Not here. Can't we go somewhere private? Your brother, he's falling apart. I know. Wire fraud will do that to a person. He made mistakes, she whispered, tears welling in her eyes. But he's your brother. No, I said, and the word felt like a key turning in a long-stuck lock. He is your son. You help him. We don't have the money. You know that. Her voice was rising, cracking with desperation. Then perhaps he shouldn't have stolen it. How can you be so cold? She cried, the tears now streaming down her face. This isn't you. You've always been the compassionate one. You're right, I said, stepping a little closer, my voice dropping so only she could hear. It isn't me. The old me would have already been transferring funds. The old me would have believed your tears. The old me thought love meant erasing myself for your comfort. But the old me died on your porch Sunday night. The words hit her like a physical blow. She recoiled, her face a mask of shock and pain. You don't mean that. I leaned in, my voice a whisper of ice. You were going to tell me you were sick. You were going to cry on command because, as Dad said, it always works. You sat there and planned it. You never once thought to just tell me the truth. Real tears were falling now. Not the performative ones they had planned, but the real, hot tears of shame and fear. We were desperate, she sobbed. No, Mom, I said, my heart aching with a grief so profound it felt bottomless. You were greedy. There's a difference. She reached for my arm. I took a step back, out of her reach. I turned and walked back toward the elevators, leaving her standing alone in the magnificent lobby of the firm I had worked so hard to become a part of. I did not look back. Thursday was a day of blessed, unnerving silence. No calls, no texts, no surprise appearances. I allowed myself a sliver of hope that they had finally understood. That the walls I had built were holding. On Friday afternoon, as I was packing my briefcase, my desk phone rang. It was the receptionist again, her voice hesitant. Serena, there's a gentleman down here. A process server. He says he has documents for you. I felt a wave of icy calm wash over me. Of course. This was the next step in the blueprint. Send him up, please. He was a nondescript man in a rumpled suit who avoided my eyes. He handed me a thick manila envelope, mumbled my name as a question, and left as soon as I nodded. I sat down at my desk and opened it. Inside was a formal legal complaint. Walter and Beatrice Croft versus Serena Croft. They were suing me. The documents claimed that the hundreds of thousands of dollars I had given them over the years were not gifts, but documented loans. They alleged that my sudden and cruel refusal to continue this financial support and my severing of contact had caused them extreme emotional distress and financial peril. It was so breathtakingly audacious, so profoundly dishonest, that I started to laugh. It wasn't a happy sound. It was a hollow, ragged laugh of pure, unadulterated disbelief. They weren't just trying to guilt me anymore. They were trying to burn me to the ground for daring to say no. I picked up the phone and called the attorney Miranda had recommended, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Olivia Grant. I scanned and emailed her the documents. She called me back in less than 15 minutes. This is garbage, she said, her voice crisp and dismissive. It's a strategic lawsuit against public participation, a slap suit, designed to intimidate and silence you. They have no contracts, no promissory notes, no evidence whatsoever. It's textbook familial harassment. We can have this thrown out, and we can countersue for malicious prosecution. I thought about it for a moment. Suing them. Taking their money, their house. Punishing them. The idea felt like acid in my stomach. No, I said softly. I don't want their money, Miss Grant. I never did. I just want to be free of them. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Understood, Miss Croft, she said, her voice a little warmer. Let me handle it. I closed the manila folder, placed it in a desk drawer, and locked it. Then I walked back into Miranda's office. London, I said, without preamble. The answer is yes. That weekend, I began to dismantle my life in Seattle. The movers were scheduled for the following Tuesday. I filled box after box, a strange sense of detachment settling over me. I packed my books, my clothes, my drafting tools. But other things I left behind. The cookbooks with my mother's spidery handwriting in the margins, noting a substitution or a tip. The framed photos from Christmases and birthdays, family gatherings where I had been the one holding the camera, always documenting, never quite participating. I wrapped each frame in paper, looked at the smiling, oblivious faces, and placed them in a box destined for donation. On Sunday morning, a call came from another unknown number. It was Julian. You're really doing it, he said, his voice raw. You're just going to let me go to prison. I'm not letting you do anything, Julian, I replied, my voice weary. You are going to prison because you committed crimes. Your actions have consequences. I could lose everything, he choked out. I already have, I said softly. My family. My trust. My entire understanding of the last 15 years of my life. All gone. There was a long silence. I was scared, he finally whispered. I didn't know what else to do. You could have told me the truth, I said. You could have come to me as a brother, not as a mark. You laughed, Julian. You and Dad and Mom. You planned my emotional destruction like it was a business strategy. I didn't mean to hurt you. You didn't think about me, I corrected him. There is a very big difference. Serena, please. I'm begging you. I already told you, Julian. Beg someone else. It's over. I hung up and blocked the number. There were no more calls after that. On Monday, I stood in the middle of my nearly empty apartment. The echo of my footsteps on the hardwood floors sounded lonely. This beautiful space, my sanctuary, now felt like a stage set for a play that had ended. I didn't cry. I simply took my last suitcase, zipped it shut, and taped a note with the London forwarding address to the front door for the movers. That night, in a hotel room near the airport, I slept more soundly than I had in years. It wasn't the sleep of peace, not yet, but the deep, exhausted sleep of surrender. The battle was over because I had refused to fight. I had simply walked off the field. Before I left for the airport, I drove back to my apartment one last time. The movers wouldn't come for another few hours. I walked through the empty rooms and went into the kitchen. I opened a lower cabinet and found it, tucked behind some old baking sheets. The twilight blue, enameled cast iron pot. I had retrieved it from my car days ago, washed it, and put it away, unable to decide its fate. I picked it up. It was cool and heavy in my hands. It was just a piece of cookware, metal and glass. But it held the weight of everything. Every hopeful drive to the island, every hour spent over a hot stove, every carefully prepared meal that I had mistaken for a conversation. It was a symbol of my love, a love they had seen as an endless buffet. I carried it to the large, industrial trash chute at the end of the hall. I didn't hurl it. I didn't smash it. I just held it over the opening for a moment, then let it go. I heard it land, far below, with a dull, final thud. At the airport, waiting to board, my phone vibrated with a text from a number I didn't recognize. But I knew. It was from Beatrice. I am sorry, Serena. Not for needing help, but for how we planned to get it. That was wrong. You deserved better from us. I hope someday you can forgive us. I stared at the words for a long time. The apology I had once craved now felt thin and inadequate. I typed a reply, my fingers steady. I hope someday you can deserve forgiveness. I hit send, then powered down my phone. I stood up and walked down the jet bridge toward the faint morning light at the other end. 6 months later, an email from Olivia Grant arrived. The lawsuit against me had been summarily dismissed. Julian had been sentenced 18 months in a low-security federal prison for wire fraud and attempted concealment of assets. My parents had sold the Bainbridge house, the house of my childhood, to cover his restitution and legal fees. They had lost most of their savings and were now living in a small rented condo in a retirement community. I felt no satisfaction, no vindictive joy, not even anger. Just a quiet, desolate sadness for the people they had chosen to be. They were just names now, characters in a story from a life I no longer inhabited. Here in London, the sky is a constantly shifting canvas of pearl gray, silver, and occasionally, a surprising, brilliant blue. I live in a flat in a converted warehouse in Shad Thames, with old brick walls and a window that looks out over the river. The water is a constant, steady presence, moving always forward. I have made friends here, colleagues who argue with me about design philosophy, neighbors who invite me for pub trivia. They value me for my ideas, my laughter, my presence. They don't know what I can do for them. They just seem to like who I am. Sometimes, on a quiet Sunday afternoon when the rain is tapping softly against the glass, I will make a stew, just for me. The aroma of rosemary and thyme fills my small kitchen. It's no longer a scent of obligation or homecoming. It's the scent of self-sufficiency. I make it not because I miss them, but because I want to remember the girl I used to be. The girl who believed that bringing food was the same as being loved. The girl who carried her heart in a cast-iron pot and left it on their doorstep again and again, hoping one day they might notice it was there and hand it back to her, whole. She is gone now. In her place is someone else. Someone who understands that love without respect is a debt, and family without honesty is a cage. Someone who has learned that walking away is not an act of abandonment, but an act of profound self-preservation. Sometimes, the only person who can truly save you is yourself. I used to think showing up was enough. That if I just kept saying yes, kept giving, kept simmering the stew and paying the bills, they would eventually see me, not just my utility. But some people can only see you through the lens of their own needs. The moment you stop being useful, you cease to be visible. I didn't leave to punish them. I left to save what was left of me.